Hey guys, it's safety video. So, I've been wanting to make a tips video for some time because when I first started riding, I hopped on YouTube and I just wanted like a real simple video that would tell me a few things about just some beginner tips on riding a dual sport or something like that. So I started off, just looking at any kind of motorcycle riding advice I could find. And I thought that the tips were like really tacky and kind of just understood already. So thought I'd just give a few tips that I've come to find that I think as we get really experienced at riding, we totally forget about them. But when we're first new, we don't realize these things. So, these are the kind of tips that everybody always says, make sure that you wear a helmet and that your tires are inflated, bike maintenance, and that's all very important. I mean, we all should have some sort of a checklist for bike maintenance, some kind of periodic maintenance type thing, but beyond that, I think that there's really just some things we do mentally as experienced riders that I know have, probably saved my life on a few times, my life on a few occasions. First thing I wanted to talk about is just like mental escape plans, and that's pretty huge in my opinion. I think that the majority of times that I think a lot of people get in accidents are things that aren't their own fault and are totally avoidable. So I think you'll notice as you watch a few like more experienced moto vloggers cruise around, you'll notice that when they pull up behind a line of parked cars, or just they tend to kind of cruise like right on the edge of the lane, which you may think is kind of dangerous, but truth be told, if you don't stay in the middle of the lane, if you kind of stay to the side, then if the guy in front of you slams on his brakes really hard or something crazy happens, you can just go around him. And a lot of times when we're panicking, we don't think logically, and we don't think about maybe what are some alternatives to just braking. We just hit the brakes really hard and hope for the best, and a lot of times that's not really the best option. There are other options out there, and one of those options a lot of times is, rather than slamming on the brakes, just to hit the brakes a little bit softer and just dive to the shoulder. So that's probably the biggest tip I can offer, is mentally prepare yourself. And just remember, when you're tempted to just hit the brakes really hard, that's not always the best course of action. Think about scenarios that could come up while you're riding. Think, well, what would happen if? What would I do? And then when the situation does come, you'll be a lot more prepared. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. So, probably the most common thing that happens to me, and probably it's the most common thing that happens to most motorcyclists I should say, is you're just cruising in your lane and someone in the lane next to you just starts getting in your lane, has no idea you're there. Now, you need to think about, you need to be keeping a map in your mind of, okay, is there anyone tailgating me? Obviously you need to know that. If they're not, and you're on a low-powered bike, your option is a lot better a lot of the time to slow down pretty drastically so that person gets in your lane. Another option is a lot of times if you stay in the right lane and someone starts doing that to you, you can just dive on the shoulder for a second until they get out of your way and you can get back on the road. So that's probably the most common thing, I think. And the other one is just people slamming on their brakes. And just as a driver in general, you shouldn't tailgate, but especially as a motorcyclist, because what would be a fender bender on a car would be potentially death just because you wanted to tailgate. So those are probably the two biggest pieces of advice I can. Being on the freeway, on the highway, is so much more dangerous because things can happen that you have less control over. If you're going like 35 or 40, you know, a lot of times you can avoid an accident. But when you get out on the highway, you know, stuff happens that would just be minor, but on a bike, it can move you. Wind is probably the most dangerous condition to ride in. And we all know this. Our biggest enemy in the wind is definitely 18-wheelers, trucks, big trucks, whatever you want to call them. A lot of times, they can create so much wind that they do things you wouldn't even expect at all. I'll give you an example. When I was a new rider, I was going 65 on a back highway, and this truck came by, and it was a fairly windy day, and it was hauling bales of hay, like super wide and super tall. And I didn't think anything of it because, you know, it was going the other way. It would have been a head-on, you know, it was coming at me and then past me. And I didn't have my helmet strap latched. My helmet's pretty tight, and at that point, a lot of times I would just ride around with the helmet not latched on the bottom. So this truck comes by, and just out of nowhere, all of a sudden my helmet is just moved up. It just shifted up, and I couldn't see a thing. And I was like, whoa, what happened, you know? And I was going 65 and riding with my brother on his DR350. And, oh man, that scared me so much. It was definitely worse wearing a dual sport helmet. And I don't recommend wearing a dual sport helmet for highway riding. That can be a big safety thing if you're a dual sport specific rider. Make sure that if you plan on doing mostly fast speeds, that your visor has tons of room between the helmet and the visor that air can go through, and that your visor probably, you don't want it to be quite as prominent. You'll see on a lot of true dual sport helmets, the visor is way smaller, and that's the reason why. As far as some just technique stuff, make sure that you understand that there's a different riding style on a dual sport than on a street bike. Edit this part out, you! So, on a dual sport, you don't have to lean with the bike so much. You're totally capable of leaning the bike and keeping your body upright. And in low traction situations, that can be huge. You may be tempted to like lean with the bike. You'll see like a street rider like tuck down with the handlebars and whatnot. So if you notice like there's gravel on the road or the road's a bit loose, stuff a street bike wouldn't be going on, that's really when you want to try to keep your body upright and tilt the bike. And I'll show you what that looks like if I can. Watch, here's a turn. So my body's upright and I'm just leaning the bike to take the turn. You don't have to lean with the bike necessarily. And a lot of times that's not something you think about when you're a new rider. So what can happen is when we're keeping our weight not leaned with the bike tire can slip out in the rear, and that's okay. But if you're leaned with the bike, if the bike tire slips out, your center, your weight's just gonna drop, and your bike's gonna come out from under you. If you're in a big group of people, a lot of times you'll need to make an adjustment, like, you know, something small, like it's hot and you want to take one of your gloves off, or, you know, your headphone came out of your helmet and you want to take your helmet up a little bit and put the earbud in, or, so, you know, something like that. But if you're riding in a group, you may think, well, I don't want to slow everybody down. I want to just stay with these guys. So you may justify adjusting your glove or something like that. And believe it or not, that's probably one of the top killers of riders. Adjusting a glove while riding, something like that. Either because maybe they lose control, or something changes in the in their riding conditions. Oh my gosh. This bike just died out. Out of gas? Oh my gosh. This thing's driving me crazy. I hit the kill switch. That's all that was. Freaked me out. So yeah. Pull over! And don't hit your kill switch. First things to check. Key on, kill switch. I know a lot of people get used bikes, and the people who had the bike before them thought it was a bad idea to have a headlight on all the time. That drives some people crazy. I've bought a couple bikes that someone installed a headlight switch. It's really important to have your headlight on. Being visible is just huge, and probably more than any cool helmet. Ha! Get away from me! Some people think the most important thing you can do is wear a bright helmet. And that's pretty important, but I think it's even more noticeable a lot of times if your headlight's on all the time, especially for dual sport guys who are buying bikes with a switch and also not have the bike die really fast. See that? Whoop. Bike leans, me up. All good. Less likely to slide out. And sliding out is not what kills you. It's when you slide out and the car behind you doesn't stop in time. So, alright guys. It's been fun. Take it easy. Hey Ruby. Over here.